All eyes are going to be on 49ers Brandon Aiyuk and if he shows up for OTAs. Now, it's important to remember that OTAs is not mandatory. You don't have to go if you don't want to. So, if Brandon Aiyuk doesn't show up to OTAs, it is not the end of the world. In fact, it is almost expected that he isn't going to show up for organized team activities. However, we did get a bit of an update over the weekend from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. Now, Jeremy Fowler is one of the more reputable sources when it comes to sharing NFL news. And he had a bit of an update on Brandon Aiyuk and the situation revolving the contract negotiations. This is what Jeremy Fowler had to say in an article posted to Niners Nation by Jason Aponte. Jeremy Fowler goes on to say, quote, "This one's tricky because he was implicated in some trade talks around the draft. He wants a new contract and he has 1 year left. As we know, the 49ers picked up the 5th-year option on his deal." Jeremy Fowler goes on to say, "I'm told the 49ers certainly are open to doing a deal, but talks have not progressed enough where things are close. And so, is he going to show up for their workouts?" Which, again, we talked about today. I don't expect Brandon Aiyuk to be at OTAs, but we'll see. Hard to tell right now. The market is pretty set for him. Amon-Ra St. Brown in Detroit did that deal recently, about $28 million a year. So that's something for Aiyuk and the 49ers to work off of. But I'm told they're not quite there yet. And of course, you've seen the headlines from this particular report saying that the 49ers, Brandon Aiyuk, far apart, not close. Okay, well, this is how I'm contextualizing it based on the information that I've received about this situation. And again, I'm not sitting here saying that I know everything that's going on, but I have heard some numbers. And based on the numbers that I have heard behind the scenes, there is a gap, but to me, in my perspective, it's a gap that can be closed. So when you hear Jeremy Fowler saying it's far apart, I think it all depends on your perception of where the 49ers currently stand right now in May and how we understand how the gap closes when you get closer to training camp. So this is the way that I'm interpreting what Jeremy Fowler has said. And again, this is going based on some of the information that I have seen about the contract negotiations. I do believe there's a gap right now. I don't think it's, they're like inching closer to the finish line and they could get this thing signed tomorrow. I don't feel like that's the case. However, kind of watching contract negotiations play out for other players, and the specific one that I rely on was between George Kittle and kind of where the gap was and what they were really trying to close and how it was kind of a battle towards the end. I'm gonna sit here and say that I kind of perceive and I look at where Brandon Aiyuk currently stands with the 49ers here in May being eerily similar to where the 49ers were with George Kittle around this time. So my perception of this is, yes, they aren't necessarily close, but we also understand that time is the greatest incentivizer of getting deals done. And we know what that timeline is. It's training camp. So I don't want anyone, and this is the way that I'm perceiving it, is I don't want anyone to look at this and be like, oh no, the 49ers aren't going to get the deal done. They're dragging their feet. Unfortunately, whether we like it, whether we don't like it, this is just standard operating procedure for the San Francisco 49ers when it comes to negotiations. These deals just don't get cut until before training camp. We have so many examples of this being the case. And so again, to contextualize it all, yes, I can look at, the numbers that were presented to me where from Brandon Aiyuk and his group and all these different types of things and from the 49ers and be like, yeah, they're far apart. But that's not how I am interpreting this because I see the time that remains. And I also see that gap will close as time continues to progress. So this is how I'm looking at it. Brandon Ayuk might most likely won't show up for OTAs and mandatory minicamp. No problems with that. We know he's working. We know he's putting in a ton of offseason where he's got a whole offseason workout team. He's good. Like, I'm not worried about BA in any sense in regards to showing up to camp out of shape or any of those things. Brandon Ayuk's in good hands. So the biggest thing right now is patience. So when you see these reports, oh, they're far apart in contracts, they're not close, the number isn't there. Just be patient. That's all I can give you at this time, is that I don't see this being an issue. I actually, based on what I've been able to gather, I feel optimistic. I saw what, and again, I can't give a lot of details, but what I saw, I was like, oh heck yeah. Like, that's where we're at here in May. And I understand that we got a couple months left to close that gap. To me, I was like, heck, oh, well, I was like, we're good. So yeah, I think again, these reports it's all based on how you're perceiving it, right? How, like, because there's no details given. And from this situation, I think, and just like I continue to explain, I really do feel like this gap will be closed. I feel like Brandon Ayuk will get what he's rightfully deserving of. And I feel like the 49ers are going to get a top tier wide receiver one for years to come to pair with Brock Purdy. It's going to be a win win. You got to pay the market rate for big time players like Brandon Ayuk. And I do think Brandon Ayuk will get ultimately what he's asking for. And again, it's important to remember we are in that period of time where it's negotiation time. So we understand that the talks will likely really kick into gear in about 2 months from now. And that's when that gap will be bridged, and the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk will come to terms, and Brandon Ayuk will be signed on a multi-year contract that will have him paid in the range of the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal. I really do believe that is kind of the target for this whole situation. And I feel like that's where they will ultimately end up. Just don't expect it to happen right now. And again, the 49ers have their own method to their madness. I can't sit here and give you any insight into what that is because I don't know. But we do know that we can identify the trends, and the trends say wait till about the beginning of training camp, end of July. We should be able to get some clarity and get a deal done. So, again, I'm optimistic about this situation. I don't look at this far apart. I don't look at it that way. So I'm excited because I think Brandon Ayuk is going to get paid and it's going to be a Niner for a long time. But what say you? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more updates.